Mac Voices is supported by Fight Camp. Look good and feel good with at-home connected boxing. Try it free for 30 days at joinfightcamp.com/voices. Mac Voices is supported by LinkedIn Jobs. Find the right person for your business today with LinkedIn Jobs. Pay what you want and get $50 off your first job post at linkedin.com/MacVoices. Welcome to Mac Voices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. This is part 2 in a Mac Voices live conversation with featured guest Mark Fuccio and a panel of experts. This time we shift gears a little bit, though, from the first part and talk about podcast tracking, what podcasts are tracking you, how they're tracking you, and some things that you can do to prevent that if that's something you're not comfortable with. So let's get back to Mark and the whole panel, and this time we even add a new participant. Well, I asked Mark to do a little homework for us by listening to something, and I'm going to put the link in the show notes. The rest of the panel will not be able to comment. They'll have to listen to Mark and I talk and then throw their opinions in. But that's a link to Ken Ray's In a Few Minutes show from yesterday, which would have been September 7th. And he had on Rob Walsh of Libsyn, the podcasting service, as his guest. And the reason I asked Mark to listen to it, and the reason I'm bringing it up, is that Rob started talking about a new feature coming to Marco Arment's Overcast that is going to show you, or I think the phrase was shed light on, what podcast subscriptions or what podcasts are doing with your privacy, who they're sharing your information with. Now, this was a short conversation. That particular feature is in beta as we speak. But according to Rob, you're going to be able to look and see who's using what services and who may be sending your data where, and as a podcast subscriber. And I think this is very interesting. And I'm fast losing my taste for not worrying about privacy. I'm starting to worry about it a lot more. And now, and Rob gave some great examples about why you might want to be concerned. And I'll just steal one of them, but please go and listen. But if you, for example, were listening to or a regular consumer of a podcast about cannabis, that might not be something that you would want known if you were applying for certain jobs. Now, we're not going to get into a debate of whether that matters or not. The point is that that's the kind of information they could be theoretically collecting on you, that you're going to be showing up in a database somewhere in somebody's computer that this is something that interests you, and insert whatever you want to in place of cannabis that they might be able to tell about you. And this was a little disturbing to me because as a podcast producer, I don't want to see. I don't track anything. I don't believe that that I'm tracking anything in any way. I feel like I am going to do a full disclosure show and say, hey, these are all the services I use to deliver Mac Voices. And, I'm not doing anything. I get no data from you or from them other than whatever they do provide that I'm happy to disclose. And, that's it. But some of the bigger podcasts they were talking about apparently are doing a lot more of this. And Mark, I'm going to start with you since you got to actually listen to the commentary. I mean, am I out of bounds here, or should I be as disturbed about this as I am?
The issue of tracking on podcasts, I think, is relative in its degree, and I would say it's way behind all the other tracking that is done, of people on the internet. And specifically, one of the difficulties of tracking with podcasts is, by and far, you download a 50 megabyte file. And it's audio when you listen to it. And there is no ability within that file, or your listener, to really do much. The tracking comes at different points. It comes when you first connect to download a file, and there they can identify your IP, or they could also fingerprint your computer. So they could figure out this is Chuck at home and Chuck at work if he ever goes back to work in this post-COVID arena. So for podcasting, it's fairly limited, and what they're trying to focus on is ability to, number one, you serve up appropriate advertising, pre-roll, post-roll. If one of the jokes I seem to hear a lot on podcasts is, does anyone ever get to the end to listen to the post-roll, as well as potentially a mid-roll insertion. So I would say that this is starting to happen, but it's certainly nowhere near as invasive or as comprehensive as what happens in just tracking in your browser. And we can talk a little bit more about these other things, but before the show ends, or before the show ends for part 2, I want to share a number of tips of things people can do to sort of anonymize themselves either way.
And before you do, I want to welcome Brittany Smith in. She has just joined us a little late, but she's always welcome. Brittany, good to have you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for your retweet earlier today.
Yeah.
So, Brittany, we're talking about the podcast issue that I sent you the link for earlier. Mark, go ahead and do your tips for anonymization. Anonymization, please.
Okay, so the key way a lot of these tracking work is, they will insert something into the page, and the page will do one of a couple of things. It will either download a tracking pixel so it can register you, but that's pretty lame. Much more invasive is it will download a JavaScript file which will run, and it's able to take a snapshot of what plugins you have on your computer and then phone home back to the tracking agency. And that's how they're able to develop a profile of your device. That there's so many different plugins that may be present on both the computer as well as the browser that it's pretty unique. That specific combination is pretty unique, like a fingerprint. So that's how a lot of these tracking services work. And there's a publicly traded company that basically what they do is they make a market in tracking people between they're browsing at home or at work on either their computer, their personal computer, or their work furnished computer, or their phone, their phone furnished computer, or their home furnished their self furnished phone, and they use that to track people, as well as also to competitively create a marketplace so that companies can bid on ads. So, it's a very, very, very sophisticated business as measured by the fact that there are public companies and wannabe, going public companies trying to make money in this. So one of the simplest things you can do is use a content blocker of some sort. So a lot of people talk about ad blockers. So ad blockers may be a subset of content blocker because, all they will do is stop you from displaying an image. Buy these shoes, order now, get free delivery by Christmas. So what an ad blocker will do is, they will stop those foreign JavaScripts from being downloaded and executed and taking a snapshot and then phoning home. So there are a number of them available in either the Mac App Store or your iPad or iPhone App Store. One of the side benefits of this is, I did a little bit of homework for the show. Is a page I visit a lot is finance.yahoo.com. That page needs to go on a diet because it's like 1.9 megabytes worth of stuff. But even worse than that, it downloads about 18 or 19 JavaScript libraries. And, those things are, definitely obese. They're like 4.2 megabytes of JavaScript code. So if you're wondering why your phone or iPad, if you're out on, if you're out and away from home and you're relying on an LTE connection, if you're wondering why it's so slow, it's because it's downloading, it's waiting, and it's downloading all of this junk. So a content blocker is a good way to do that. If you don't use Safari, if you use, say, Firefox, there's a tool I use. It's called uBlock UBlock Origin, and it has its own built-in list that the developer maintains, And it avoids downloading all sorts of stuff. And the benefit is, number one, is privacy, as well as your browsing experience is much faster because you're not waiting for CRUD to download and then render within your browser. So those are fairly simple things to do. The final thing is for people, if you're not scared of the terminal, is you can go in and locally on every Mac, there's a thing called the hosts file. And basically, that's a local DNS version that maps, www.macvoices.com, from its IP address, 123.456.789.111. So what you can do is you can download different places, and I'll send a link to Chuck to put in the show notes. You can download information that, again, third parties, the great open source developer community create, that track all of these things. For years, I've blocked all sorts of stuff from Facebook just because, I'm philosophically opposed to their confusing people so that they can steal their personal information and then sell it. But there are all sorts of other stuff out there. There are trackers from Adobe as well as all sorts of other companies out there. So that's maybe a more sophisticated, more extreme way of blocking some of this. And again, there is overlap between that and some of these content blockers. But I think going back to the opening, right now podcasting tracking is in its infancy. The one I would be most worried about is good old Spotify. Why? Because they have their own proprietary browser, so they require a lot of information when you sign up for their service, and then they can monitor and watch everything you're doing. So that's intrinsically much more intrusive than something like an Apple Podcast app or some of these others, where basically all they do is they download a file, and maybe at the start or end of the process they activate a little bit so that. Sort of what they'll do is they'll master different versions of the file that have different pre-roll or post-roll or mid-roll ad insertions. And certainly I've noticed in the past 2 or 3 months, one podcast I listened to, I don't want to shame the business organization, but its name rhymes with Mike Bloomberg, the former mayor of New York. They've gone to, instead of host read, they have inserted ads, and it's at the really stupidest places. They do it somewhere around the middle, and maybe sometimes conversations volumes ebb and flow, and then when it gets really soft, bam, they insert a stupid ad and just distort the whole podcast. So it's a little bit of a moving target, but ultimately, it seems to me that we're sort of at this turning point, and it'll be interesting because, Chuck, Mike, Kelly, you are all podcasters. I'm just a guest, but you're all podcasters. And it seems that the whole market, everyone has been thinking in the past couple of years, gee, everyone could podcast. There's a gold mine out there. And a lot of these tools, I think, are ramping up to try to get big accounts where they want to get 5 million exposures for their XYZ ad, and they need automation to support that. And I think that's why these companies are creating these tools in order to fulfill that demand. So anyway, back to somebody.
Well, and you kind of took exactly where I wanted to go, Mark, that Kelly and Mike and I are all podcast producers. And so I don't like the idea that somebody out there is tarnishing the podcast. I mean, podcasting up to this point, I think, has been, well, maybe not up to this point, apparently not, but for a while was pretty pure. And now commercialization is set in, which happens all the time, but it bothers me. Mike, I mean, how do you feel? Because you produce a little bit different kind of a podcast.
Mike, you're muted.
Oh yeah, you're muted, Mike. Sorry.
Sorry about that.
All that wisdom lost.
No, there's no wisdom there. Well, I don't produce a podcast as I'm used to, like something that is, downloaded or people who subscribe to my podcast would get it. But it's on a different platform that is far more easier to like the whole system is there as far as directing ads and taking all your private information, everything you're doing basically online. Google is evil. Isn't that their motto? We are evil? No, it's not.
I think it used to be don't be evil. Now I think it's don't get caught.
There you go.
Somebody else. That's somebody else.
Well, that's Matt Geekab's thing.
I know
so.
they ripped it off from Dave. They're just hoping he doesn't sue.
Oh, good. Kelly, does it bother you? I mean, or is this just part of the natural evolution of the development of the medium?
Well, here's the thing: is that Overcast doing it like, let's say, I know this isn't true, but let's say, for example, that Overcast was the only one doing this. They were the only app that was doing this sort of, friends also liked, or whatever that weird thing is at the bottom of Amazon recommendations. And let's pretend that they're the only one that does. The way to get around that is to stop using Overcast. Plain and simple. I would like to have, I like to have information about my shows in that I want the vaguest of profiles, like primarily people who are end users, primarily people who have been using a Mac or whatever for 10 years or more, people who have had an iPhone for 5 years or more. Like if there's a way to get that sort of information, like I don't need to know the 5 people listening right now are using this device or whatever, but finding out like this many people downloaded on a Mac, this many people downloaded on a phone, this many people downloaded on a watch, in a box with a Fox, whatever. Finding out finding basic data like that would be very nice for me. I don't want to know more than that. And part of that is because the ads when I have ads on my show, specifically on Daily Observations, I guess I should be specific, there are several. When I have ads on Daily Observations, I read them, and I read them as part of the episode. So it's not just a minute for a word from our sponsors, and then we go off to, Guy Smiley or whoever pimping something to you, and then we come back to me, and I go, and now on with the show. That's not what's happening. So it's me going, hold on a minute, let me tell you about this thing for a minute, and then now let's talk about whatever the thing is we're talking about now. So like, as far as sharing the information about what you listen to, there are already apps that do that. I think it was, and Chuck, I think you spoke with her too, somebody who started the thing that was like social networking based around podcasts. And I'm absolutely blanking on the name of it, and I feel bad because it's a cool app.
I'm blanking even on the topic.
But it was a social network built on podcasting. It was exactly what we're talking about with what Marco wants to do. And it's is it Breaker? Spreaker? I'm not going to remember, but it was something like that. Yeah. And I want to say you talked to her too. But that's been a long time ago, because let's see. Dub 2019 was like 7 years ago now. So, because March was 5 years long, so 7
Math
years.
Checks out.
Yeah.
So I think, like, there are already ways to do this. There's ways to share clips out of Overcast so other people know what you're listening to. There's ways to share podcast episodes easily out to Twitter or Facebook or MySpace or wherever it is people share podcasts these days. I don't know what the young people are doing anymore. So, like, there's a lot of ways to let people know what you're listening to without somebody else scraping that data and doing something with it. And, I think there's a whole lot here about data privacy, data protection, data anonymization. Like, if there's absolutely no way for anyone to find out that I'm listening to the official Puff Puff Pass podcasts or whatever, then, to use your example, Chuck, from the question, then Chuck has no idea what I'm talking about right now.
The what? Never mind.
That's my second favorite Chuck expression.
Well, I'm glad I can make it the most common Chuck expression whenever I.
The what? Never mind. Keep rolling.
I'll tell you later, Chuck. Okay. So, anyway, like, if there's content I don't want people to know that I'm listening to, and there's no way for people to find out that it was me that was listening to it, then that's probably fine. But if it really does bother you, like, this may be breaking news to some people, but Overcast isn't the only game in town. Just like Castro isn't the only game in town, and the Apple Podcasts app isn't the only game in town. So if the app that you are using to do this is doing something that you don't like, you can get a different app. That's very easy to do. That's the thing I think.
I would just clarify. Yeah. I think Overcast was exposing it. It wasn't doing it.
Exactly. This is not an Overcast thing tracking you. This is Overcast giving you, the listener, information on what Podcast X is doing with your privacy. So. I want that. Yeah. Well, exactly. Yeah. So, and it's going to be interesting to see if this becomes a regular thing in all podcast apps.
Well, relatedly, like, we've had the conversation about, like, a couple of times with regards to TDO. We've had conversations about like what somebody who wants to be a sponsor of shows on Backbeat Media, which is who does the advertising end of my show, Daily Observations, as well as Matt Geek Gab, and I think Chuck MacVoices is Backbeat Media as well. There's been conversations about like, there are advertisers who want to do this with your data, or the data, the data that they get from people who click on the link or whatever. And like, Dave's stance with that has always kind of been, well, no, like that, I'm not interested in that. I'm absolutely interested in finding out if there is something a podcast is doing that's scraping my data. And it's just so that I know what I want to do with it. There are 5 people on this panel right now. I'm sure every one of us, depending on the podcast and what data they're collecting and what they're doing with it, we're all going to have a different set of answers to how okay that is with each of us, depending on all of these factors. And it's just a matter of awareness. Like, I just want to know. So tell me, and it's up to me to decide if that's a thing that I want to continue to do or not. And I mean, that's part of where Security Friday came from on Daily Observations, is just making people aware of this. Like, I think there are still a whole lot of people who don't really have a good handle on how much of their data is out in the world and easy to get with a minimum of effort. And podcast data is just another one of those things. It sort of reminds me of people saying that they, like, people offering services, right, to clean up your Facebook feed so that when you went for job interviews, they wouldn't find all those party photos from college or whatever. And like, why, it's not hard to find that stuff if somebody wants to, if it's out there, unless you are someone of a particular vintage, which means there was no such thing as photography when you were in college, so nobody has those photos anymore. So I think there's a certain amount of that needs to happen because people need to be aware of how much of your stuff is out there. So
I don't think we have anybody of those vintages, Kelly.
Well, I grew up in an era, at least before digital cameras were common. Finding making sure the film got developed and that somebody still has it, and that they have a good way to scan it, and that they have a good way to put it on Facebook, and like, it's a lot harder to find pictures of.
Or worse, it's on the MySpace account that you can't remember how to log into.
Yes.
If the Polaroids
random
were good
example.
Enough, they've found their way out somewhere.
Exactly. Yeah.
Fight Camp is supporting this edition of Mac Voices. Look good and feel good with at-home connected boxing. Do you get bored with your workouts? Me too. So why not find something brand new? Fight Camp. Fight Camp brings the boxing gym to your home with all the gear and top trainers provided. Boxing workouts are a great way to get in shape, combining cardio and strength training. The gear includes one of the best freestanding punching bags on the market, great boxing gloves, and quick hand wraps, along with punch tracking sensors that provide real-time progress and stats on any iOS device. That makes Fight Camp workouts great for adults and kids as well, since kids' gloves are also available. Watch your progress through your milestones and develop that goal-crushing mentality in every part of your life. Healthy body, healthy mind, and all that. And with over 400 different workouts for all fitness levels and skills, and 4 new ones added each week, you will never run out and get bored. Fight Camp offers flexible financing for as low as 0% APR And right now, as a limited time offer, you can try Fight Camp for 30 days with their money-back guarantee. Just go to joinfightcamp.com/voices. That's right, try Fight Camp for 30 days, and if you don't love it, they'll refund your money. Train like a fighter and turn your sweat into results. To try Fight Camp for 30 days, just go to joinfightcamp.com/voices. joinfightcamp.com/voices. Thanks to Fight Camp for sponsoring Mac Voices. LinkedIn Jobs is supporting this edition of Mac Voices. Hiring the right people is one of the best ways to help grow your business, but it shouldn't take time away from your other priorities. With LinkedIn Jobs, it doesn't have to. Getting a job has changed. Finding good people for a job you need to fill has changed. And I don't know anyone who isn't looking for good people to make their organization run. With LinkedIn Jobs, you get candidates screened for both the hard and the soft skills you're looking for. That helps you make that hire fast. And I mentioned soft skills. LinkedIn looks beyond the work skills and qualification and puts your job post in front of the qualified candidates who match your requirements. Did you know that a person is hired every 8 seconds with LinkedIn Jobs? And that LinkedIn Jobs has been rated the #1 hiring platform for delivering quality hires? I use LinkedIn. I don't know anyone who is in business who doesn't use LinkedIn. And that's why to find the right person for your business, you need to go to linkedin.com/MacVoices today. Pay what you want and get the first $50 off at linkedin.com/MacVoices. LinkedIn.com/MacVoices for $50 off your first hire. Terms and conditions apply. Thanks to LinkedIn Jobs for their support of Mac Voices. Brittany, do you have any reaction to this? I mean, we're almost out of time, but I want to make sure you get a chance to get in here a little bit. Any gut level reaction from where you sit as a podcast listener?
I shouldn't be. I guess I should be more cynical. But yeah, when I first heard that on the In a Few Minutes podcast, I was like, oh, they are? Okay. I was disappointed, even though I guess it's the rest of the internet. I can hate it, but should I still be disappointed? I don't know. But I was like, I had an appalled moment. I very much remembered it when you sent me the link, Chuck. I was like, yeah, I remember that. I've been now keeping my eye open for the update and information. So,
you know what?
Yeah.
That's a good word. I think is appalled. I should know it. I'm sure I was like marginally aware of it, but just to have it slapped up in my face, and now I'm really waiting for that feature to come out of beta and to see, everything that I subscribe to and who's doing what with. And I subscribe to a lot of independent podcasts. I subscribe to a couple big name podcasts. That's going to be interesting to see what the dynamic is in between. No question.
So I would change this a little bit. In prior lives, for about 11 years, I was a podcast sponsor. So from that, some of the companies that were mentioned in that show, they do share some things that are potentially attractive to a sponsor. One of the unanswered questions is how many people actually listen to your ad, and really they don't have any great way of answering that, because it's buried. Where is it? Is it in minute 2 or minute 15 or minute 30 or minute 120? You have no way of knowing. And then the other thing is the other company that was mentioned claims to have better demographic information and targeting. So that's potentially useful for selecting podcasts. But the difficulty is that if you're really interested in a very narrow segment, it's not clear if that's really useful. It seems to me that this is more about the automation of podcast ad insertion to make it as horrible as AM and FM radio is, where they just inject ads, at too rapid a frequency of stuff that's just irrelevant to anybody. So certainly, this is what Spotify is trying to do in their claims for their system. Mm-hmm. Overall, it's not clear yet what Apple wants to do, if anything out there. But I think still just knowing who's listening to it, maybe if they really do have a profile on the person, that might be useful and that might be valuable. So whether we like it or not, I think that's the direction that this is going. Doing that separate and apart from listening apps, it's really tough because when you download stuff on your phone, to my knowledge, the Apple reader or the other readers, they don't execute JavaScript. So, it's only tiny, whatever the subset is that listens to podcasts, through a browser, on a pad or computer. Those might be useful, but best of my knowledge, that seems to be between maybe 30, maybe as high as 40% of the market, which might be useful for some gigantic, consumer advertisers. But I still think it's, it feels like it's a long way in coming. I mean, we've been hearing for years now that this is the year and the breakout year for podcasts, and it doesn't seem to me to be that way, despite the proliferation of your shows. But again, Chuck and Kelly, you can tell us: are you rolling in the dough from all the ads that come in, banging at your door that you have to turn them away? I'm being facetious here.
You've no idea.
Yeah. I'm having my third Ferrari delivered tomorrow. Yeah.
Damn.
Podcast ads are how I afford my rock and roll lifestyle.
I mean, I know I'm trying to figure out where to spend my advertising dollars for a company that is a scary proposition because feel like you're throwing it into a black hole. I've worked with small businesses and stuff on that, but at the same time, I don't know any data. Like, do they actually make any more money if they have targeted ads, or are we just talking about covering up anxiety?
A little bit of both, but some some direct research. So a combination of my own personal experience as well as direct research I did about 8 or 9 years ago on podcasts. Is the listeners, they know when a sponsor comes right away, their interest and their trust level is going down. So yes, podcasts are an intimate medium, but once a sponsor comes on, people start to become suspicious. And despite some shows talk about they only select products that they personally know and love, and that helps increase trust with an audience. That by far the most effective thing is something that comes up where people talk about the JKL product that they use that comes up in discussion that's not sponsored. Things like that is demonstrably measurable by podcast listeners. Is some of the stuff that they trust most, as well as I have firsthand experience when things like that have come up. You see a big rocket up in sales. So if companies are using podcasts for sort of direct response, i.e. to trigger a buy, sorry, most podcast sponsorship is not the way to do it. It's ultimately more about brand building and exposure, as if we don't know that we should buy Coca-Cola or Pepsi when we feel thirsty and want a soft drink in the summertime. So I say that because I think that's may ultimately become the ruinification of the podcast medium as so many of us know and love it today.
Yeah.
Well, okay. As a user, I had an issue this week where I wanted to upgrade a software that was recently featured on the Daily Observations podcast. And I didn't think of it, like I was ruminating on it when it was actually the active sponsor, but it was later that I chose to do it. And then had to contact Kelly about a problem. But oops. But that will happen where I'll go like, oh, so-and-so had a coupon code and I'll go find it. But I also listen to very narrow set of podcasts that it is really easy to know jack about me, except that I listen to that podcast and have successful advertising. I'm a nerd who listens to tech podcasts. Hello. I take in no media practically except for podcasts that has advertising. If you're an advertiser, that is the only way to reach me. And now I don't go
Can't
out. You can't
confirm.
even do buses.
No, can't confirm.
Right. But
So-
if that particular show, if one of the shows you listen to is something that you would rather people not know you listen to, and I'm not going to even make up any joke, just if there was something that you didn't want them to know about you, but you were really interested in it, theoretically that was the point of what was on Ken's show. Theoretically, that goes in a database somewhere that could be dug out, that could be used against you. A lot of coulds in there.
Oh, I'm anti the whole shadow profile thing as a general rule. But what I'm saying is, for me, and this may bias me, like all you need to know is I listen to tech podcasts and I probably want to hear about a nerdy tech thing. Like, you need no data to successfully sell me.
Okay. Guys, we're over time. Yeah, we're over time.
No.
Yes, I know. Well, you didn't come until late. You were changing your shirt to red.
Brittany didn't get the memo, obviously.
Yeah, Brittany didn't quite get the red memo, but she provides a nice contrast. Hey, so I want to make sure, folks, if you're listening to this after the fact, I will put the link to Ken's show, the specific episode, in the show notes. Go and listen to it and let us know if this bothers you or if this is just sort of business as usual for the internet and you're not surprised. Because I was surprised, and I would like to know what you think. Before we go, let's go around the desk and let everyone know what podcasts you produce, if you produce a podcast, or where they can find you. And so I'm just going to take the order that's on my screen. Mike?
I am the Average Wine Enthusiast. Hit the youtube.com and look for the Average Wine Enthusiast and learn how to get some good value on wine and what some good wine to drink is, and find out what I'm drinking.
And what you were drinking tonight, because you were imbibing a little bit here tonight.
It's some Côte de Provence rosé.
Okay, there you go. Free plug for Côte de Provence.
As if it needs a plug.
Yeah. Hey, Mike, thanks for stopping by. It was great to see you. Always a pleasure.
My pleasure.
Mr. Fuccio, our featured expert on just about everything, especially the Fire and Big Sur.
Yes. So best way to find me, easiest way is on Twitter at MarkFuccio, at Mark Fuccio, one word, lowercase.
Thanks for coming, Mark. Thanks for sharing your wisdom. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for the invite. I hope maybe you can sleep a little bit better tonight, or maybe not. Maybe you're going to be up all night.
Well, you never know. Kelly?
Well, as long as I can still produce a podcast, we're having a weather event here and at the same time as fires. And so we're having a wind event and a heat event and all of the smoke. And a couple of towns, a couple of hours south of me, there's like a small town that's just been obliterated by a forest fire like this afternoon.
I've gotten multiple evacuation notices to my phone, which is why I looked distracted during this.
As I was going to say.
They're not from my area, but they're near.
A couple of them are between, well, the one I'm thinking of is between Brittany and I. While I can, anyway, you can find me weekday mornings over at the Mac Observer hosting the Daily Observations podcast. You can occasionally find me telling people things about Star Wars and other stuff I love over at The Incomparable, where I show up as a panelist, and I also have a show called Greetings from the Uncanny Valley about the show Westworld, which I do with Don Melton. And Mike Rose produces a podcast called The After Show with Mike and Kelly, where I appear very regularly. And gosh, I think that might be it. Yeah, that seems like it. And the rest of the time, you can find me on Twitter as Verso, and apparently, very soon, you're going to find me drinking rosé from Côte de Provence.
Okay. Wait, thanks for stopping in, Kelly, and thank you for wearing red. Yeah. It just kind of goes with the theme.
Can't do anything right.
I showed up and went, wait, is it because it's Star Trek Day? I was having a moment of is that what's happening right now?
No. If we had said it was Star Trek Day, then that doesn't bode well for the panel. So,
Woohoo!
Yeah, it does. Brittany disagrees with you there, Chuck.
Yeah. Brittany will be hosting next week's MacVoices Live. Brittany,
The only one left.
Yeah,
Yes.
Brittany,
Blue for command.
where can folks find you? Thank you.
On Twitter, I am ADD Liberator. That's
And the
good
rest
for
of the
today.
time, she's listening to podcasts. Where
Right.
were you?
And there's also the website. Come on, Brittany.
Okay. My website for my productivity, technology, and ADHD coaching is conquer.consulting. And YouTube doesn't have my own link, but it's on my website.
Okay, great.
I'm just not that important and big.
Yeah, she
Forget
says
it.
that, but she makes these videos with tech tips that are really awesome, and they're also very awesome for regular people. So if you are the tech support person for your family, and this is an unsolicited plug, Brittany has no idea I'm doing this. You can watch her blush while I do it. If you are the person who does tech support for your family, just send them Brittany's videos because they can pause and rewind and watch at their own speed and get tips out of them and get useful information without you having to be on the phone with them and go swipe down, no, from the top to the swipe down, just, yeah.
Yeah.
Ask me how I know. So Brittany's YouTube channel is pretty great, and I'm glad that the videos are featured on her website because you probably need them.
Great. And I will have links in the show notes to that as well. Panel, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate it. This was an interesting discussion. I don't know if we solved anything, and next week on MacVoices Live, we will have definitely a panel to discuss whatever Apple does announce that afternoon. So please, right now, go and tell your favorite voice assistant to remind you 8 p.m. Eastern next Tuesday to tune into MacVoices Live. Until the next time, and as always, I'm Chuck Joyner. Thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with MacVoices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you Mac Voices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.